Thanks for being here, all of you. Before we get started on our discussion today, which I think you're going to find very interesting, I wanted to do a little bit of an exercise with you. There are studies that show, because I teach at Kansas State University, one of the things I like to do with the students is after they've had a lecture to ask them, what did you take out of that lecture? Because studies have shown that if you can kind of extract the key nuggets and identify that in your own brain, it helps for retention over time. So I want to pose the question to you from yesterday, particularly the keynote lecture last night. I thought there was a lot of really interesting things discussed there. I want to get some audience involvement here and think of what was the one thing to you that stood out yesterday that you've already written down. They're like, this is important. I hadn't thought of this, or we need to do this, or we need to approach this differently. Is there anything anyone would be willing to share of what stood out to you yesterday in either the keynote, in your boardroom discussions, or potentially in some of the other meetings that you had, or discussions that you had amongst peers throughout the day? Does anyone have anything you'd be willing to share?
Yeah. So what stood out to me mostly, and we've been pretty decent at doing this, is just the need for more parcel storage, right? Large parcels, parcel rooms. Even the refrigerated storage I hadn't really thought of until yesterday. That was kind of interesting. So,
because it's not only an issue with Gen Z, it's something we see with all age ranges. Just Gen Z is probably doubling down on that. So thank you for sharing that. Other things that stood out to you across yesterday? Letting it marinate. Here we go.
I believe right now it's more about listening and trying to identify certain problems that you might have not thought of. So, like, perfect example is just like the package lockers. We've been doing the package lockers, but bringing in the refrigerant type lockers is one of the things that we didn't even think about. Identifying problems like that, like maybe the residents think about those type of problems, but we don't know because we don't live in those communities at that time. So stuff like that.
There's a lot of value in dedicating time to talk to your end customers and listening to the voice of the customer. That a lot of those type of insights, sometimes you can't just see that that's a problem. You need to talk to your customers and understand, hear their voice saying, hey, I really wish that this was different, or this is the pain point that I'm experiencing as a customer. Any other insights from the group? Thanks for those that have shared so far. Maybe if we can get one more, and then we're going to jump into our presentation.
Yes, from the keynote yesterday, it was very eye-opening to hear that over half of all homes bought in December of 2020, I believe is what he said, were purchased before even visiting. So just seeing that people are becoming more open to more virtual options and making large decisions based on that.
It's happening across many industries that we kind of jumped forward 5 years in some of the technology that's available and getting people used to that technology. Certainly in education, Zoom is something that most of you probably hadn't heard of Zoom prior to the pandemic. It was really only an education focus. The rest of us were on WebEx, and maybe some of us were on Teams, but it drastically changed, and everyone got used to using a technology for all sorts of things that they hadn't before.
Sorry, I don't want to hog the microphone.
Oh, you're fine.
The one other thing that stood out to me is just thinking about what some of the younger generations coming into these projects are looking for besides, old guys like me, and what we think is cool to put in apartments and useful doesn't necessarily translate down to, the younger generation, so to speak. We just did a project and put this cool gaming center in this apartment project, and even before we opened the doors of this little gaming center, the management company told us to sell all the computers and tear it out because it was a stupid idea. That none of the younger generations were going to come hang out in this little room and play on these gaming machines. So
The preferences of generations certainly change. One that's not related to this industry, but I think when I turned 16, it was a race to get your driver's license and to drive a car, and then that's completely different. I've got 3 of my children that are, as they reach 16, just really didn't care about getting a driver's license. All right, any other thoughts or questions? If not, we will jump into our discussion today. So I'm going to transition over here to our group, kind of piggybacking off of one of the 10 items from the keynote last night was creating a frictionless experience. That was focusing particularly on the sales experience and how can we make the sales experience more frictionless. But we're going to go beyond that and talk about ways that we can create and support a frictionless experience leveraging technology in our living spaces. And I'll kind of tee that up a bit more in just a moment, but I'd like to introduce our 3 guests today, all from TVS Design, Eric, Emery, and Ian, and we'll give them a chance to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about their role with TVS and about what TVS does. So, Eric, if you'll lead off.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Waldman. I'm the Vice President of Venue Services with TVS Design. Unlike my 2 colleagues here, I am not an architect. I am actually a venue manager by trade. So similar to this venue that you're in today, over the course of my career, I've managed large-scale stadiums, large-scale arenas where you would typically see an NBA or NHL team play, as well as different public assembly facilities. So my role with the organization is really quality control. So when we design a facility, I go in and I look at it from a venue manager's perspective and give feedback and comments to our designers. But then I also speak the language of our clients. So sometimes you need to have somebody who's kind of been in those same situations to be able to empathize with a client, and I'm able to translate that to our team. And I also work a little bit on our business development side. So thanks for having us today, and just look forward to the discussion.
Emery.
Yeah, so I am an architect. I've been at TVS for about 25 years and done a number of different projects of different project types. I have not done multifamily, but I think that's why they invited me here today, was to talk about what's happening with technology and other project types and how that might be of interest to everyone in the room. So I've done cultural arts, which is we kind of lump performing arts, museums, churches, libraries kind of into that group, but I also do a lot of work in public assembly, which would be facilities like this, and also office. I guess I've done probably everything but multifamily. Sorry, but that's why we brought Ian.
Ian.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Hunter. I'm the multifamily market lead at TVS. I'm an architect and an interior designer. And I'm the only multifamily architect up here on the stage, and there's a reason for that. TVS offered me a great opportunity years ago to start up the multifamily studio, and before that I had worked a lot of my career in firms that only did multifamily. And what I started to recognize was that, and I'm sure some of you know this, multifamily sometimes has the reputation of being the caboose of the technology train and the caboose of the innovation train when it comes to different market sectors, pulling from hospitality, workplace, corporate office, et cetera. And what we do at TVS is work collaboratively with people like Eric and Emery, who are learning lessons in other disciplines, other product types, and we're trying to infuse multifamily at an earlier stage to make projects more competitive. And so we're all at TVS. We've been around for a little bit over 50 years. I haven't been around for over 50 years, but the firm has been. And we operate out of Atlanta, but we work globally and coast to coast. So, and that's me.
So tell us a little bit about this first image.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of kick off
That sounds
the discussion.
great. So this is one of our current prototype projects. It is located in Denver, Colorado, and this is a really good example of a project that we're relying on a lot of our different disciplines. We're leveraging the Workplace Studio, especially now that more and more people are working from home because of COVID, to be able to understand the technology that we've been implementing in corporate workplace environments into these buildings, and understanding how the idea of a co-working space in multifamily is working. But everything from the amenities, we have our hospitality leader, Aaron Gentry, collaborates with us, and we can learn the lessons on how he's put together resort pools for companies like Ritz-Carlton to be able to infuse those ideas into these. So this is just a little glamour shot of our project, current project on the boards, and our mission in multifamily, besides making it cutting edge with all of these different disciplines input at TVS, is to make sure that we make multifamily buildings that aren't ugly. So we're proud to show non-ugly multifamily buildings.
So here we have, we're in this room talking about multifamily. And we know that investors and builders in this area don't have a huge appetite for risk when it comes to something new. But when we look at these other type of venues, whether it's public assembly, multicultural facilities, there is a greater willingness to try something new in order to differentiate, to reduce friction, to improve the customer experience, and also to showcase technology. And so our goal today is to kind of peer into these other kind of sideline industries and say, what are they doing? And Ian will be able to kind of bring us back to multifam as we look at a couple different projects and technologies and experiences to say, how might this translate into multifam? But also, I hope that your minds are thinking, okay, that's a really cool technology used in this particular type of venue. How might we use that within multifam? And towards the end of today, we are going to have a little bit more time for additional questions for this team up here. So if you have questions along the way, keep them, share them, and we'll get to them towards the end. So we're going to start with Emory and ask Emory if he can share one of our recent projects that they've done that he believes has some relevance to the multifamily space moving forward.
Okay, yeah, so the first one here is the College Football Hall of Fame, relocated from Notre Dame to Atlanta, Georgia. The project completed in 2015.
Has anybody been there in the audience?
Anyone
Show of
been
hand.
to it? Not yet? Well, it's a Hall of Fame for college football. They located it in Atlanta, and they said, okay, it's not the SEC Hall of Fame, it's the Hall of Fame for everyone. And technology had to play a really key part, because they didn't want it to be a room full of busts of heroic figures. They wanted it to be much more interactive, informational, educational. And so technology played a big part of it. And it was finished in 2014. So, and you mentioned that the technology was new, but at this point, the technology, is over 6-7 years old. But it's because the technology was designed to support the mission, it still is very relevant, and probably more so. So it's the College Football Hall of Fame. This is the front entrance. You go you run through a little tunnel through the entrance, and on the left of this image is a series of iPads. And you come in, you're wearing a lanyard, much like your conference lanyards, and in that is an RFID chip. And you just walk up to the iPad, give a very minimal amount of information, your name, your email, and the team that you support. And you enter that information, and this is the helmet wall, and you're rewarded for doing that. The helmet wall is over 850 helmets. It's every college football team in the U.S. at all levels. It's not SEC, not ACC.
Not just.
Not just, that's right. So the helmet will light up and recognize that you're there. And and after it'll flash, and the wall can also register who else is in the building too, so you know what other teams are present. Those stay lit, and it can do a lot of other things, but generally it's designed to reward you for giving that little piece of information. Then as you go through the rest of the building will bring up content relative to your team, so it knows who you are. And as these are, we call these the playing cards. This is actually the Hall of Fame room itself, where they replace busts with playing cards, which are digital boards. As you walk up to it, it recognizes your team, pulls up all the players from that team that are inducted into the Hall of Fame, and you can learn about them. There's videos, there's stories, there's all kinds of information on there. So the building reacts to you, and this is just one exhibit of many that do that. And actually, on subsequent slides here, you'll see Eric volunteered to put some of this stuff up of his experience at the Hall of Fame. Because you give your email, you can also, it's portable. So any interaction and things that you do in some of these interactive exhibits, you can take them with you after. And a side benefit to the facility is that they now know all of the fans from Ohio State that have been in the facility. And if they have an event and the coach shows up, they can shoot a quick email, sorry to bother you, just wanted you to know the coach is in town. If you want to come back and listen to a lecture, here's the information on that.
So you're hyper-targeting those type of messages to your potential audience.
Absolutely. So, and that's all based on your lanyard. And
going back to the marketing piece for a second, I think one thing it also does, Atlanta does a ton of bid sporting events. So Super Bowl, NCAA Final Four, they do the SEC Championship every year, the Chick-fil-A Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Kickoff, which is usually an SEC versus ACC team. Sometimes they get into the Big Ten. But what it does is it helps to promote that even further. So, knowing like the Ohio States or like the University of Georgias of the world, hey, they're coming, you should come and, oh, by the way, stop by the College Football Hall of Fame before you, attend the event.
So we have some examples of Eric's day at the Hall of Fame.
This is Eric of 6 years ago.
There you go.
So this picture was taken at one of the little booths there.
So this is a face painting booth where you can, it takes your picture and you can put decals on your face. It gives you that picture. It's Instagram ready. It sends it to you. You can post it.
Yeah, and there's basically when you go online after your experience, right, you can immediately go to your cell phone, type in, the code that's on the back of your lanyard, which ties it back to the information that you put in at the front end of it, and then every experience that you had within the College Football Hall of Fame that you decided that you wanted to do basically pops up in this area. And believe it or not, I hadn't looked at this stuff in since we did it, and I was like, I wonder if it's still there. And right before, as we were preparing for this, I went online, found it, and was able to capture some of these screenshots for today's presentation and kick it to Emory. So it literally stays there in perpetuity for you to access as long as you have all that relevant information.
Okay, so this next part, this video, is my favorite part of this whole presentation. So, Eric, tee this up for us. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, so as part of the College Football Hall of Fame, you basically have the ability to be on College Game Day. Does everybody know what College Game Day is? Show of hands. I guess it should be a show of hands. Who doesn't know what College Game Day is? So very popular show on ESPN. It gives you the ability to go in there and basically announce the upcoming game. And when Lee Corso, at the end of the video, he usually dons whatever the headgear is for the mascot of the team that wins. So knowing that University of Central Florida is my alma mater, huge fan of UCF football, we did a little College Game Day.
Go Big 12.
Yes, go Big 12.
Okay, here we go. The video.
Welcome back to ESPN College Game Day, built by the Home Depot. It's the moment now we've all been waiting for. Here to pick the winner. Today's biggest game is our special guest.
Thanks, Chris. It's our turn to pick the winners in today's matchup here at Bright House Network Stadium, where the Eastern Carolina Pirates are facing off against UCF Knights. Doesn't get any better than that, Des.
No, it doesn't, my friend. This is what college football is all about. So tell us, everyone wants to know, who do you have in the big game?
Well, Desmond, it's a no-brainer. I'm picking the Knights all the way. Go Knights! UCF!
Well, I see, and we'll all see soon enough.
All right, there you have it, football fans. For our special guest and all of us at College Game Day built by the Home Depot, enjoy the game.
Oh, man.
Okay, so let's turn this over to Ian now. So Ian, great technology, great for this type of venue. What might be some ways this can translate over to a multi-fam environment?
So when we start to collaborate with it among the disciplines at TVS, I think sometimes we're backing into what the problems that we see in multifamily are after we understand what the technology can do. And when we started looking at this technology and how it can relate to the multifamily experience, to us, the obvious application was your lease walk. COVID and self-touring has become more and more popular over the past 18, 24 months, but it only exacerbated a trend that was really already happening. If you look at any data around Gen Z, they're very happy to take their own lease walk. I'm not Gen Z, I'm a millennial, but I like to take my own lease walk because I know what I want to see and I don't want to waste time, and I'm probably going to tour 8 properties in one day and make a decision, and it's those memory points that are going to bring you back to the property that you're going to sign on the dotted line for. And as the self-touring has become more popular, one of the issues that we found is that it's not frictionless. You are having to interact with somebody. You're getting a map of the property. It may be on your phone, but it's just a map. It's easy to get lost if anybody has walked around a multifamily property of 300, 400, 500 units. Being able to get to a model unit is something that your leasing agent is actually really helping with, is making that seamless transition. But once you have to go and find it on your own, it becomes really challenging. So the important thing about this technology is twofold. One is that you have a credential, which can easily be your phone, and you register it, and simultaneously the operating company is able to communicate with you and get information back about how to contact you, understand where you went in the building, where you spent the most time. But the second piece is building that into the actual built environment. So a lot of times we see unit doors have some kind of surround. They may have a light fixture in it. This is just an example. But when you look down a corridor and you see door after door after door, it can be intimidating, hard to find the unit that you're looking for. But we can actually take those model unit lights and have them glow a different color as people are moving through the space, for example. So when you turn the corner and you look down the hall, you see a glowing green door, you know that's the door you're supposed to go to. And that can hold true for all of the amenity spaces that you're guiding people through the property. And that's exactly how the light up football helmet worked here. You have your credential, it understands what you're looking for, and we can actually create more of a custom tailored experience. So a lot of times people get frustrated moving through a multifamily site if, for example, they already have a gym membership, they're completely uninterested in knowing what your fitness center looks like. They feel like they've wasted 7-8 minutes of their time going to this fitness center that they just know they're never going to use. And we hope that we'll design fitness centers that everybody will want to use, but in this hypothetical situation. And so people can actually tailor their tour to just what they want to see. And that feedback loop that's happening here, like Emery and Eric were saying, where the College Football Hall of Fame can reach out to you because of it knew the inputs that you provided, but it also knows where you spent your time. We can follow back up with that. So for example, if we know somebody spent a lot of time looking over the pool deck on their lease walk, when you do a follow-up, instead of it being generic and showing you all the amenities, it's a package that's really around the pool deck. So there are a lot of opportunities that we're seeing in this technology that work in a two-way fashion to be able to make that experience truly a frictionless experience and make it feel really interactive.
Awesome. That's helpful. Okay. Moving on, then we got Emery's experience. Now we're going to talk about Eric, and he's going to share a recent project or technology that's got you excited about the future of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So in public assembly, I mean, we are always looking at kind of the future of technology, and the one thing that you're seeing more and more of with food services companies getting excited about is really the Amazon walkout technology. And this picture is actually over in TD Garden in Boston. They've got 2 locations in the arena, and it's been a really great opportunity for them. Something that I think if you ask them if they could have more of them, they would say, yes, please. One, because it limits the amount of staff that's required, and it also increases the throughput of people being able to go in, get what they want, and then get right back to their seat during intermission. Makes those lines at the concession stands a little bit less. And let's not kid ourselves. Every time you go to a restaurant now, there's usually like a sign on the front of the door that says, "National labor shortage, be patient with us," right? Well, now you can, whatever staff that you do have, you can kind of reallocate them to more of the labor-intensive, stands that have like, hamburgers, chicken tenders, French fries, things of that nature. A lot of what I'm talking about today is going to be around concessions, obviously, and food services about the different facilities. So here we have a new arena coming on board here in Seattle called Climate Pledge Arena. It's over by the Space Needle. If you have an opportunity to walk over there, it's not open yet, but at least you can go and see it, the outside of it. But they're also adopting the Amazon technology there, and it'll be probably one of the biggest that's out there right now. So we talk about a frictionless experience. This is truly that frictionless experience. Actually, do you mind going back one slide? I'm sorry. So when you walk to the, you walk up to the space and you see kind of that gate and that turnstile, you'll see a little keypad on the right there. Basically what you do is you grab your credit card, and I think in the future, you'll be able to actually use your phone and maybe even your actual Amazon app where everything is tied to that. But for the way Boston does it, it's a credit card for right now. You basically put your credit card in the machine, and it's got a camera that takes a picture of your face. And then basically what it does is it ties your facial recognition to that credit card, which allows you to enter the space and be able to take what you want. It's very gimmicky, right? And I think that's what makes it so successful. I think people are always wanting to, especially millennials and the Gen Zers and stuff like that, they want to try something new, right? It's experiential, right? And they can tweet about it, they can Instagram about it, they can TikTok about it, whatever it is, and it consistently promotes, the center and the experience that you'll have at the center. Go to the next one there. So this is the actual space. As you can see, in this particular model, everything is pre-packaged already. So you don't have any of the, like I said before, the chicken tenders, the cooked meals or anything else like that. Everything is like candy, bags of chips, beer, soda, water. In Boston, you have to be 21 to go into the space unless you're accompanied by an adult, because they don't want people just going in there and underage and grabbing all the beer that you can and giving it to your friends. So they're right now, that's kind of what they're really looking to do. There's very little error when it comes to this experience. And, in talking to the concessionaire, I said, listen, there's got to be some type of like mess ups and lift and things like that, which you guys are potentially losing money because it just doesn't pick it up. And he said, quite the opposite. He's like, we have more lift in the actual concession stands for user error on the registers, or people giving away free food and stuff like that because they've got groups that are working in the concession stands than we do here. He said in the tens of thousands of customer interactions that we've had 2 where people said that they were charged for something that they didn't actually get. And you know what? We said, okay, no problem, and we refunded it, no problem. And he's like, it is absolutely incredible. As you'll see in this picture here, And you made up, well, I know, that's all right, go back there. You can kind of see, and we'll get a better picture of it later, but up in the ceiling, you'll see these little sensors that pop down. And really the way the process works is after you put your credit card in and you got your facial recognition, you go walk around and you can grab anything there. And what the sensors do is it senses your face and that you basically have picked up something. But another area that it actually has from a technology standpoint is everything is weighted. So everything that's all the packaging that sits on the stands or even in the walk-in coolers, you pick something up, it deducts that weight from the actual cabinet or whatever you want to call it, and then the sensors capture your face, and it says, okay, Eric took a bottle of water and a bag of chips, so we've got that in his shopping cart, right? And then if I said, you know what, I really don't want that bag of chips, I'm going to put it back, and I put the bag of chips back, it knows that I put the bag of chips back, and it deducts it from my shopping cart. And then you can keep going there. This is basically the process. It's literally this easy. You basically enter with your credit card, you shop for what you need, and you walk out. You can kind of go to the next one there. And there's a little bit of kind of what the sensors looks like. It's kind of a big upfront cost. I couldn't tell you necessarily what that cost is. I just know it's a bit of an upfront cost. But for what you're saving in labor and time, in lift, I think the payoff is relatively short. And then when you're done with your purchase, is basically you walk out. There's no staff or anybody that's there that tells you, hey, you need to pay for that or whatever. No, it literally takes a picture of your face, and then whatever's in your shopping cart automatically gets charged to your card. I'm an Amex user, and I usually pay for most stuff with my Amex, and I usually get a notification on my phone when you have a card that spends. And literally, you walk out of this thing, and it's like, oh, yep, $10 for my bag of chips and a water, and it basically takes that right into account. So it's Boston has put staff in place because people are still a little bit new to the process, and they're like, I just want to make sure that I've paid for this and I didn't steal it. I didn't walk out of here and not paid for it. And they're like, no, you're good, go ahead. And it's been a great process, and you've seen people using it time over time. A couple other things, from a technology standpoint that we're starting to see, and I'm just going to touch base on a very high level. We're working on some projects right now in the convention world where we're trying to figure out that speed of transaction. A group called MashGin, where basically, if I was taking my coffee and my, water here, I put it under a camera, and the camera takes pictures of it from all angles, knows what I've got, and then basically I can pay for it. That's a new technology that some of the food service companies are working with that tie into the point of sale systems. Lockers for pre-orders, we talked about the bit of the lockers earlier today, and then yesterday we talked about the lockers for mail and packages and things like that. Well, we're starting to see it on the food services side where you basically do mobile order, like say right before halftime of a game or right before intermission of a hockey game, and then it says, all right, your food will be ready or your order will be ready in 10 minutes. You basically go to that locker, type in the code, and then the door opens up similar to like an Amazon package or whatever, and you go and you grab your stuff and you're on your way. Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, so important. Most people, obviously with the coin shortage, and who's got cash in their wallet right now? I think I have like $1 maybe, but like everybody's using either a credit card or their phone, and most of these venues are also going cashless to where you have to use it. And for those baby boomers or other folks that typically haven't really adapted to the credit card, Apple Pay yet, they have what's called a reverse ATM, where you can actually put cash into a machine and get a gift card, like a Visa gift card back, to where you can go and turn and use it elsewhere. At first, when folks started going cashless, they started seeing a lot of use of those, but literally over the course of the last couple of years, they're very few and far in between. It's not even worth the investment anymore to have these machines on your campus. So so frictionless technology, frictionless experiences, that's where we're going in public assembly facility, and we're looking at implementing them everywhere we can.
Okay, so I think I see some possible applications here, but Ian, lead us to the path and connect us with how might this really resonate with our audience here when it comes to multifamily?
Yeah, so the first application that we thought of is option A. It's a dumb one-to-one transfer, right? It's an amenity that you can offer. And one of the things that we're always trying to do in multifamily properties is keep people on the property. You can live and work and play within your multifamily development. And we've seen it, maybe a decade ago, especially in garden-style apartments. We saw the convenience store as a popular amenity item, but it was staffed. There had to be an employee there. It had a limited number of hours. And so we could literally take this concept, tie it back to your rent payment. You can go to the store 24 hours a day, pick up what you need. It is a totally seamless experience, and then just gets billed to you at the end of the month through your rent. That's the dumb solution. And then we started thinking about discussions that we've had with our clients, that we see people having in conferences around multifamily about amenity usage. And amenities are a two-way street. So there's an amenities war, right? Everybody wants the best amenities, they want the most amenities. But at the same time, you do lose people who recognize, especially our market demographics are becoming savvier and savvier, that they don't want to pay for something that they don't use. So if you've got a bomb gym and somebody doesn't want to use the gym, well, they see those dollars that they're putting forward in their rent, but they recognize that they're not going to use it. And we've talked for a long time in our industry about amenity usage being essentially like pay per use. How do you make an amenity package that's tailored to somebody? And it's a win-win situation. It can actually become a revenue generator for a property, and it allows you to provide lower base rents for people, and then say, as you use your amenities, the fitness center, the pool, the co-working space, et cetera, that just gets charged to you, but we've never found a way for it to be frictionless. And the minute, even in this case, where you have to tap a credit card or swipe a key fob, that's a bit of friction, and people register in their minds that they're paying for something. But when you truly make something frictionless, it becomes effortless, and people will use those amenities without even thinking about it. And then, so our proposed application for this type of technology in multifamily, and what we're looking at in this Denver project, is that you have a base rent, and all of your amenity, and the base rent is more than competitive in the market. So you're coming, $80, $100, $150 under market rent. And then all of the amenities on top of that are given to you in this seamless experience. And it works with this facial recognition software. And as you use the amenities, they just get billed back to your rent at the end of the month. And it draws people in who may have been hesitant about moving into this property because they felt like they were going to pay for amenities that they weren't going to use. But we don't think you're going to lose people using the pool, using the fitness amenities, using the co-working spaces. Instead, that it actually will become a revenue generator. You'll actually make more money on the pay-per-use, but it has to be frictionless. And this technology allows us to do that, to have people move freely through the space and not have to think at all about the use for those.
It seems to tie in well to some of the discussions we had with Gen Z yesterday, particularly as not concerned about the privacy.
Correct.
If this makes the experience easier, I'm all in. Not wanting to pay for things I'm not using, but if I want something, I'm willing to pay for it, and there is a greater willingness to pay for those things if I know that I'm getting the value from it. And so it's kind of the a la carte. I'm going to pick exactly what I want to use, and you can charge me for it because at that moment I wanted to use that thing, but not having this feeling at the end of the month that I paid for something and I never got to experience the utility of that particular add-on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a trend that we're seeing in what we talked about in the experience of the lease walk, and this is that this technology is doing two things. It's allowing for a better experience, but it's reducing the number of people that need to be involved in transactions. And so that's the win-win situation. And it used to feel like if you start reducing people and you start reducing human interaction, that was a negative, that residents wanted to interact with a person. They wanted to feel like their customized experience was being crafted by another human being, and that's just not the case anymore. It's in fact completely the opposite. They want a digital experience that they can then tailor to their own specific needs. And that's where we see the technology that we talked about with the tracking software and being able to customize your lease walk, and as well as this being able to do the pay-per-use amenity programs, allows people to really take ownership over their experience, and it's more customized than anything that you can do face-to-face.
So cool, so cool. All right. So the last 18 months of the pandemic have definitely created a lot of disruption in every industry. We've already talked about some of that today. So the question now is to Emery, is we've met as a group here over the last few weeks. You shared a project that certainly has some relevance with merging where we live and where we work. Can you share this with our audience?
Yeah, so again, not necessarily something new. This is a project from 2015, 2016, but as with all things pandemic, you start looking at what you have differently and you start using things differently. So this was a social media room this was a marketing headquarters for a large corporation, and they wanted to encourage their employees that worked at this facility to get the brand out there social media wise. But you can easily see what it could become now is the Zoom room that everyone's talking about. And so something that was intended to be used for one thing now becomes probably that much more vital. And you talk about WeWork and sort of that revolution and has already started to be absorbed, as I understand it, in multifamily. But even now, I think how these WeWork spaces may be utilized is going to change dramatically, right? And you all know this. We've all been through this together, right? But this idea of having a space that, again, is a checkout, frictionless checkout opportunity for your guests, your clients, your tenants, that they can use that's better than the white wall behind their kitchen work island or what have you, where they can have that higher end space for video conferencing, for interviews, for all those kinds of things that they would need to kind of step it up from their sofa, for example. And so, yeah, this is this space. I haven't asked these folks if that's what's happening now, because everyone's working from home, I'm sure. But the idea of it and having it, transporting it out of the work environment into your living environment is an interesting idea. And to piggyback on sort of Eric's experience, the idea of having this kind of broadcast technology integrated into these projects is something that Public Assembly is looking at pretty hard as well. And we have done some other little pilot concept projects like this one, where we took a meeting room in an existing convention facility and flipped it into a broadcast studio. Our clients up in New York City at the Javits Center, they went ahead and did it. They set up a space as a broadcast space for. They were looking at it, as a frictionless way for someone who doesn't have that technology. Their clients who show up and host events like this, to just come in and have a pre-made broadcast studio where they could MC a convention that is a hybrid, which is where we're all headed, right? where you have some in person potentially and some folks attending virtually. And so you need that sports center MC to kind of call the games as they happen at various times throughout the day.
I think actually on that point, Emery, I think we talk about the experience that you all are currently having as part of this convention, right? If there was some type of broadcast studio and you had that, in convention host, there could be TVs in the concourse that are basically, kind of talking about the different experiences, while you're on your coffee break or while you're in between meeting breaks and whatnot, and tell you what's coming up and, talk to you about things that are happening in the city, promote, additional promotion for sponsors, things like that. So it's not just Brandon standing at the podium thanking the sponsors, which thank you all sponsors if you're here, but it also gives them some additional, love out in the concourse and throughout the overall experience.
Yeah, and so, as a part of this space, there were also, the idea was to create, and you can kind of see one in the bottom left-hand side there, create pre-made backdrops, like a set stage. This was designed to have sort of a main stage with maybe a digital background, with probably more serious, multiple cameras aiming at it. But then there was also a need to have, really kind of grab and go is probably kind of a great description of it. Show up, stand in front of a backdrop that's already there, camera's already in position, shoot your video, do your interview, whatever it is, and check out and you're done. And so the idea of, this is pretty obviously heavy duty for something like multifamily that Ian can speak to, but that idea of having that other space that you can reserve, you can check out and use in the new way that we do work these days.
Yeah, and I think also on the, as you all are, again, experiencing this conference today, can you imagine if you were sitting at home, on one of those web platforms, there's always a chat room, right? Or the chat that goes on with things that are happening. You could, if you're at home, you could be chatting, you could be experiencing the app, looking at other things while we're sitting here presenting. And if we said something that, sparked your interest, or there was a slide that you really liked, it's being recorded and you can go back and look at it again. But now take that same experience and you're sitting here. So you may say, I want to chat about that while we're having this conversation right now. And because a lot of you, are on your phones doing other things, which is okay, but you could also be in the app chatting and having dialogue amongst yourselves over stuff that we've said. And then when it comes to the Q&A, that makes the interaction with us, that much more effective because you've had an opportunity to vet it amongst yourselves before it gets back to us. And it's all being recorded, and it's all, can be looked at a later date. And that's what these broadcast studios really help do. It helps package a lot of that information, helps integrate with whatever that virtual app is, and then allows for that hybrid experience to happen.
And, when we started thinking about how does this is kind of a different path that we're talking about here, because it's not really about the technology. We all understand the technology. We understand microphones. We understand webcams. We understand that everybody's been looking up all of our nostrils for the past 18 months with the little webcam on your laptop. And I think everybody has a really good grasp about what we don't like about those experiences or what becomes really challenging. And those pods, those recording pods that Emery was talking about, they tie hand in hand to what we're seeing in the projects that we've done, that our team has produced, and how people are using the co-working spaces. Because before COVID, we had a lot of diversity in the co-working spaces, the WeWork style spaces that we were designing into multifamily apartment complexes, in the sense that we had some booths, we had some open tables. We left a lot of options for how people would want to work in the co-working space. And candidly, we rarely saw these spaces full. And now if you go into multifamily co-working spaces, they're full, especially if there's an isolated booth space. So I just was in a property, The Manor in Denver the other day, and I walked into the co-working space, and there were these individual booths. There were about 6 of them, packed. Clearly, these people had set up for the day, and they needed that because it offered privacy. It allowed them to get out of their unit to be able to separate work and life. And it gave them a background that was clean, relatively speaking, clean, looking, professional. And then there were tons of other tables and open spaces, and nobody was interested in using any of that. It was completely empty. And so what we think we're going to see is that the work from home shift is here to stay for a lot of industries. There are going to be more and more people working from home. They want to be able to get out of their unit for the day. There is a dollar value associated in their rent with being able to do that. And we need to refocus on those individual booths, because people are rarely working in these co-working spaces with other colleagues face to face. They're doing it over webcams. So
good lighting, space for my camera, interesting background, soundproofed.
Exactly.
For the most part.
Absolutely.
And it literally, I mean, I see myself using that type of space wherever I can, and it doesn't need to be a big space.
Right.
And if I'm on a Zoom, that's what I need, is I just need the lighting, the camera, quiet for everyone around me, and then if I'm doing other projects, I can pull out of that cube and go work at the table. But so much more of it is Zoom-based or camera-based.
Absolutely, and we want to be able to create these pods that allow you to have, one, it needs to be frictionless, obviously, but being able to connect to the microphone, to the camera, have the right lighting is really important. And it's what we think is better than what you're going to be able to set up in your unit. And I mean, we definitely work with people who have light rings up, and there's a lot of complicated stuff going on, and they're sitting at their kitchen counter, right? Which is just not how people, I think, want to live long term. But the second piece of this is how we integrate this technology and these booths into non-work co-working spaces or workplaces. Because the second thing that we're learning from the projects that we see in the market and the projects that we've worked on is that people aren't working in the co-working spaces, they're working in the nicest spaces. So just because you have a room with a label on the door that says business center, if there's something with better light, better Wi-Fi connection, better views, has the coffee machine or whatever it may be, has the wine.
And a better chair. For those that are working full day, a chair is so important that we don't think about, but as soon as I moved to quarantine, it was like, I need to go back to my office and steal my chair, however I get my chair from there to home.
Well, and we're seeing people on a 70-degree day that's beautiful out, people are taking their laptops out to the pool decks, and people are using every public space in multifamily properties as working space. Everything outside of their unit is game for where you want to work. It's just whatever's the nicest. And so instead of having these pods all congregated together in a work-share space, what we're proposing is that you start to think about how working can happen all around the property. And there is a benefit to that, because one of the things that becomes problematic as you do a lease walk is somebody comes for a lease walk, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you go to the pool deck, you go to the fitness center, you go to the Sky Lounge in your property, and nobody's there. It's a dead space. It's very hard for people to visualize people themselves using spaces that they don't see other people using. So what we want to do, and everybody wants to do, is maximize those amenity spaces being used 24 hours a day. And this is the perfect opportunity to be able to do that. So being able to put the technology in all of your amenity spaces for people to be able to work is really going to change the way people use your property. And we think it's really going to be seen as an added benefit to be able to have your pool deck or your Sky Lounge set up as a place that you can work during the day.
All right, as we look at return on investment, I'm going to kind of summarize, I think, the things that we've talked about, and if I miss anything important, please chime in. Obviously, from a retail space, being able to no longer have staff, even though you've got an investment up front, it sounds like there can be a fairly quick ROI on being able to incorporate retail space, or using that same technology to be able to increase your average rent based on actual usage, a pay-as-you-go for the different amenities throughout the space. Going back to our first example from using the RFID technology, being able to help the sales experience, the walkthrough experience be more frictionless. That also requires less staff. And then on top of all of that, if you create a space where your tenants like to live, spend more time, your churn levels are going to be less, your occupancy is going to be higher, that pays for itself. Any other real critical ROI items that should be discussed?
That's the big one. I think for us, everybody's worked a really long time on figuring out how to reduce hard costs on project construction, right? And we've gotten projects, we're working on projects like the one you saw at the beginning slide. It's modular, so every facade, every unit is exactly the same, still creating visual interest. So from a hard cost perspective, we feel like we've done a really excellent job as an industry being able to get costs low as they can be. But operations are a whole new world that we really think that the design teams haven't explored. And it's low-hanging fruit because we hear simultaneously the biggest costs are salaries for people working on site. And the thing that residents don't want to deal with is people on site. So we're paying a lot of money for something that people don't want, and that's the low-hanging fruit for us. So we want to reduce the number of people that need to be on site full-time and give that better experience with all of these things that we talked about today.
Okay, so we're right at 5 minutes left. Would love to answer any questions you have from the group. These QR codes will take you to each of their respective pages on the TVS website, including their email address. I know they're going to be around afterwards as well to answer any questions for about an hour, and then you guys are flying back home. Questions from the audience you'd like to ask Eric, Emery, or Ian? Over here.
So when you were talking about spaces, I see that the one thing that we're struggling with is how to reserve those spaces. So if we build them and we track a charge through the rent and all that good stuff, but I like the idea of being able to reserve and monetize that with the rental, like using their fob, but how can we create, or what solution did you have to have some kind of like scheduling system where residents would know, like, hey, that slot's taken for those type of spaces?
That's a great question. We actually were literally talking about that last night, I suppose, because we understand that those spaces are extremely popular and they're full.
Build more.
Build more is definitely one of them. When we're seeing a property with 350 units and 6 booths, the math's not adding up there, right? We know more people are working from home and want those, so we think we need to expand that. The second thing is the pay-per-use and the occupancy charge. That's going to help. The problem we've seen at some is like people get there 7 a.m. and they just camp out all day and leave their stuff there. And if you get charged for it, you're a little bit smarter about how you're using those spaces. But you're absolutely right. We do need to be able to offer something, we think, where you're going to be able to schedule it. Now, our workplace studio is really where we go to for that kind of technology. Personally, I wish it was more seamless because you still have to book it, you still have to sign up on an app for it, but it goes hand in hand with that facial recognition technology where you can book a space and access control the pods for those webcam experiences, and when you've signed up, it will unlock for you. And so we think that that's the kind of technology that we're looking at being able to.
Yeah, the way I've heard it described is, you're accustomed to spaces having occupancy sensors for lighting. The space will brighten up for you, HVAC will turn on. Well, these occupancy sensors are only getting smarter and better, so they know when a space is occupied. And the workplace environment is going through a transition just like everyone, and they're shrinking footprint because they're realizing that people are working from home. And so a lot of them are using these occupancy sensors. When you step off the elevator, you walk into the space, here's a board, here's all the spaces that are occupied, here's the ones that aren't, pick your space, and you're signed in and you go. And so the spaces know if they're occupied or not, And they call it hoteling, right? When you're in the work environment. Some of you are probably doing that right now, just like we are.
Sounds like it's similar technology what Katie described yesterday with the picking up the packages and whatnot. It's like you kind of you're on your app and you go and you just click on it and you kind of get into the space. It's got cameras and probably ties into like Johnson Controls or something like that.
Okay, time for one more question.
This is more directed at Ian, but Ian, what one amenity would you choose to build for the next 2 years if you could only put one in a property?
If you can only put one in the property, it's your pool deck. It's always the pool deck. But it's an interesting question because for us, the pool amenity, and it does not matter what climate, you can be in Wisconsin and people want their pool. And what we're recognizing is kind of like what we had talked about, the co-working with people working from the pool deck. There needs to be infrastructure in your pool deck, and we're really rethinking the way in which your outdoor amenity decks work. People, I think we saw in yesterday's presentation here in multifamily that the number one amenity that Gen Z will pay for is actually balconies. It's outdoor space. And so we're seeing this drastic shift in all amenities to outdoor space. And what we're noting is that as we look to the future, that the pool deck is going to be the center of all of your amenities. And a lot of these amenities are going to be outdoors. So we're looking at co-working spaces, fitness spaces, all of these items as indoor, outdoor, or sometimes fully outdoor spaces, depending on your climate.
Well, fantastic. This ends the general session for this morning.